We want to have a conversation now about legal aid and National Legal Aid Service. Our guest this morning, we have two gentlemen. William Musyoki Kimanthi is the board chair of the National Legal Aid Service. He's here alongside Kisuya, who is the state counsel. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Welcome to Kenya's biggest conversation.
Thank you.
William, that's the hot seat of the Situation Room. Caleb, that's the second hot seat of the Situation Room. This morning we make both of them hot. We want to understand a lot about the National Legal Aid Service, what this is all about, and how citizens should benefit from this. But to welcome you to this conversation, Siti Muga is here, and he has a bucket full of proverbs.
Yes.
This week the proverbs are from which country, Siti?
Congo, Brazzaville.
Congo, Brazzaville.
Republic of Congo. This is not to be confused with DRC.
Oh, yeah.
This Congo borders a certain ocean that is known as Atlantic.
Okay.
Yes, this is a beautiful thing about this continent. There's Indian Ocean to the east. Is it west? And then there's east. Yeah, thank you very much. And then we have the Atlantic to the west. The west is a very large area. I mean, I'm trying to picture that part
all the way
to West Africa. Now,
including north.
Easterly.
East. South of the...
What's the official name of Congo Brazzaville?
The Republic of Congo.
That's it?
Yes.
So it's just, you remove the word democratic and you have a new country?
Yes.
Okay.
But so that we do not... Because even DRC is Congo.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So that is why it is known by its capital. Okay? There's a little history behind it, but that's the story I'll tell you tomorrow. Okay. The rain does not fear the authority of a king. Now, in Kilingala, what they say is Mbula ebangaka mokonzi te.
Mbula ebangaka mokonzi te.
Yes.
Musyoka?
Yes.
They're not talking about Mbula.
Well, actually, I was wondering whether they are counting because Mbula and Mbua,
close.
Rain.
Yes.
It's close, yeah. So at least you can have an idea what they're talking about.
They are both Bantu languages.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the rain
does not fear the authority of a king.
Does not fear the authority of a king.
You know, these declarations that leaders like making. Make a declaration for the rain and let's see what happens. Just make a declaration and say, this rain will cease tomorrow. Man, it will rain like you've never seen before.
William, what's your interpretation of this proverb?
It doesn't matter what position you hold. If it's time to rain, it will rain on everybody, whether you're the king, whether you're the subject, whether you're indeed anything found on the land, including animals and crops. I guess that's what it means. Yeah.
Caleb, what's yours?
I've understood it to mean that if something is supposed to happen, it will happen, irrespective of your authority, whether you dictate or a Democrat. Either way, it must happen. It is like powers of nature. You can't control them.
Nature is no respecter of kings.
Yeah.
Okay. Now let's get to learn about the National Legal Aid Service, and we'll start with you, William.
Yes.
As the board chairman.
Yes.
So tell us what this is.
Yes. National Legal Aid Service, I would say, is the sum total of all the legal framework and institutional frameworks that have been put up in place to give effect to some articles of the Constitution, particularly Article 19(2), Article 48, and Article 52. Now, of course, that may not make much sense unless I go further.
No, it makes sense. There are very many articles.
So perhaps I could elaborate. Now, with the coming of the new Constitution, we have this celebrated chapter called Chapter 4, which talks about fundamental rights and freedoms. And you've heard a lot of commentators saying why our Constitution is so beautiful because of that particular chapter. Now, it talks about fundamental rights, and Article 19(2), which forms part of the basis of the National Legal Aid Service, talks about recognition of those fundamental rights, and not just recognition, but taking steps to make sure that they are enjoyed. People have their human dignity preserved. We promote social justice and also help individuals realize their full human potential. That is Article 19(2). Then again, fundamental rights and freedoms, we are told that they are not granted by the state. they accrue to us merely by virtue of being humans. And therefore, the second question arises, what are these rights? And there's so many of them. I mean, one of them is what you're doing here. The freedom of expression, to just be able to sit and talk what you want to talk about. But for purposes, we have Article 48 that talks about access to justice. It's one of the rights that are guaranteed to citizens by virtue of our Constitution.
Just pause.
Yes, please.
Guaranteed.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, you're going to elaborate on what you mean by guaranteed.
Yes, okay. Now, again, of course, we have other rights. For example, the right to life. We have freedoms like freedom from slavery, freedom from
hunger,
and other rights actually that the president have been talking about to housing, to health. For our purposes, of course, I'll insist that Article 48 talks about access to justice being guaranteed. And then again now Article 50 that talks about the right to fair trial. There are so many things that are listed as to what constitutes a right to fair trial. But for our purposes, we are interested in Article 50, sub-article 2, G and H. It talks about the right to have an advocate to represent you. And H talks about the right to be assigned an advocate if there's a likelihood of prejudice to be caused to an accused person when you're presented to court for trial. So now to go back to what does NLAS do? We are a state agency mandated to make sure that we give effect to those provisions of the Constitution.
Okay. Right to fair trial comes with right to have an advocate.
Yes.
Or to have an advocate assigned.
Yes.
To you.
Yes.
Assigned by whom?
By the courts. When you're presented to court at the first instance, you have a right to be informed promptly, and is an express also provision of the Constitution, to be told that you have a right to be represented, to have an advocate of your own choice. And that right actually is stated as such in the Constitution. But then the following section, 52H, says that you have a right to be assigned. So the first one talks about you having the right to may choose or not choose. But if in the assessment of the trial court, there is a likelihood of prejudice to be suffered and you cannot afford, then you have to be assigned. So yes, what the court does is to inform you of that right. Of course, it doesn't choose for you. And that's why we are there. They write letters to us and say, we have a case here. In our assessment, the accused person is likely to suffer prejudice. If it's not represented, they have a right to have an advocate. Please take it over.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is it only on the basis of the fact that this individual or this party is likely to suffer prejudice, then that the right to have somebody defend them comes into play? Or can it just be open-ended and say, look, this individual cannot afford an advocate and one ought to be provided to them? Which one are we looking at here?
It is open-ended, I would say. It's not a question of whether you're likely to suffer prejudice. You have a right to be represented by an advocate in whatever circumstances.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is kind of like the Office of the Public Defender, is it not?
Yes,
Which
it is,
we've been kind of... The conversation has been in judicial circles for a while now about the establishment of the Office of Public Defender. What would be the difference between the NLAS and the Office of the Public Defender?
I won't say... Thank you. I won't say there's much difference, because basically, if you look at our mandates, and which is very elaborate, you look at the Act, there are a lot of things that you're mandated by law to do, and the bottom line is that you're defending the public. Yeah, so strictly speaking, there won't really be much difference between what NLAS does and what a public defender should do. Yeah.
Is NLAS established by law?
Absolutely, yes. So to give effect to those articles of the Constitution, law was set up. The Legal Aid Act, which was passed on the 26th of April 2016. And the commencement date was sometime in May 2017. So yes, we operate under the law.
And what's the structure?
The law sets up the Legal Aid Service Board, for which I am the chair. I sit with other 9 board members. We have a secretariat comprised of advocates like my colleague here, Mr. Caleb Kisuya, and many others. There's a question you asked at the start, whether it's under the AG or it's under NLAS. when it was conceptualized, initially it was supposed to be under the AG, but that was before the law came into force. And part of what it's trying to give effect to the law is to become independent, so that we are operating fully independently as a national legal aid service. But for now, we haven't gotten there yet, but it's something we're working towards. Yeah.
Okay, so how is this characterized? How is it constituted, NLAS now? I would imagine a cohort of advocates who are then ready to represent anybody who does not have access to legal representation. Or how does that work? That a case comes up and then we assign somebody to you? Or,
Yeah. Actually, it's a very good question. Yeah, we are supposed to be more or less like the largest law firm. You can imagine if we are going to stand out and say that we are the body that is mandated by law to present people who cannot. First of all, the moment you talk about the people who cannot afford legal services, there are many. In fact, the wording of the statute, I think at the start there, it says it's an act of parliament to provide legal aid to the vulnerable, to the indigent, to the marginalized. And that form a huge part of our population. Meaning, therefore, that if you're going to provide services to that huge cluster of people, we need a lot of lawyers. Is it
a huge part of our population, or is it the majority of our population?
Well, majority. Wow. Again, a question of language. A majority of the population. And to tie that to also what happens, there's been this feeling that legal services are preserve of the rich.
Yep.
And when you talk about economic, social rights, political rights, is one thing to talk about it. It's another to actually go ahead and actualize. And what the law is doing is to give effect to those rights, to be available to that majority part of our population. Now, to go back to your question, Lou, how do we go about it? We are supposed to be that large law firm. In fact, a study has been done and shows that if we were to act optimally, as contemplated in the law, we are supposed to have as many as 1,200 advocates. Where we have in the several court stations, I think we have about 150 court stations across the country. Just like we have DPP or police station everywhere across the country, the same way we're supposed to have an office in every station, so that if somebody then has conflict with the law, and not necessarily conflict, there are people who still just want to access legal services. Yes. You can go to that office and then you ask about legal advice, about access to courts, about whatever legal issue you have. We do not have that. What we have at the moment, because of still working as a department of the AG, we have a very lean staff. We have few advocates who have been seconded to our office by the Honorable Attorney General. In fact, not many. We have only about 10 advocates at the moment. And that is what is supposed to happen. We get letters from the court. Remember what he said about courts assigning an advocate.
Yep.
These letters are supposed to come to us. And then we assign it to a state council and say, please deal with this matter.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Is there any county in this country that doesn't have the presence of the AG's office?
The AGs, I am told they are decentralizing. There are counties that don't have, but they're doing very well. I'm sure I've heard about decentralization. So they are going to those counties at the moment.
See, so do you know how many counties these are?
The ones where the AG is?
Is not. Where the presence is not there and they're working towards
I
it.
don't exactly how many that is not.
The numbers may not be important, but the reason why I ask is I am of the view that if indeed you fall under the AG's office, then I would take it that where there is a representation of the AG's office,
that is what it should be, but it shouldn't be like that. I said actually in the process of delinking.
It should be independent.
We should be independent. And in fact, steps have been taken. And the AG is also helping us to help us delink. For now, because initially the idea was conceptualized as a department under the AG, we are now trying to link so that we are independent from the AG. So we should be independent, and we're working towards that. There are steps to be taken. There are processes of making an agency like ours semi-autonomous.
What are the benefits of being semi-autonomous?
Well, because we're able to make our own decisions, and I'll tell you why. For example, when you have a board like we have, the whole idea of having a board with representation like we have, the whole idea is to give them autonomy to make their own decisions and to take responsibility for the success of an act like we have the Legal Aid Act. And now to burden now the AG, who has other responsibilities. One of the benefits would be this. You can imagine, we want to employ. I've told you the number of advocates we have, about 9 or 10. We should have 1,200. But because they're not independent and we want to employ, we have to make a reference to the AG's office. Already, you wonder, why then do you have a board, which by law, as authority, is to employ? But because you are not linked, we still have to refer. So one of the benefits, to answer your question, is that it gives us both decision autonomy and also financial autonomy. I mean, there are those things that we'd like to do to give effect to the law, but because, again, we still have to make reference to another office, we are unable to do those things.
Now, given that you're all legal individuals, just help us understand this. If you get the autonomy,
yes,
it would mean you have a separate budget.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. What are the steps that one then has to take to ensure that you have the sort of budget that would meet your needs? I ask the question because in many instances when we have people who are public officers, the one thing that uniformly they talk about
is lack of funds.
Yes.
Yeah.
Uniformly.
Yeah. And you're coming to count it. That's true. And I think that is one of the reasons we're here. First of all, to make people understand that there are these rights. And number two, for them to be able to enjoy those rights. And I said it's not enough to say that you have the rights. Steps must be taken to make sure that funds are available to make those rights useful, if at all. I'll give you an example. Article 43 of the Constitution talks about the right to decent housing.
Yep.
And steps are being taken to make sure that that right is exercised. And that's why you're talking about deducting some money from. The same article talks about the rights to health. And steps are being taken to make sure that there's sufficient, systems in place to make sure that people have access to health. Perhaps the question would be, are there some rights that are more, important than others? The right to access to justice is in the same constitution, under the same fundamental rights like the other rights. And therefore, the same way steps are being taken to make sure there's funding for health, for housing. I must say this. I appeared before the JLAC, Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, and the same question was posed. And I was saying, look, we may have to consider, of course, I was shut it down quite quickly, whether this is the right time to talk about now introducing yet another tax to fund, because where else do we get the money? For now, we are anticipating that once we have the fund, it's one of the things that we're also trying to do. We haven't set up the fund. The state is going to put funds there, and also we expect money from donors. For now, in as much as don't have the fund, I can confirm to you that we are working with a lot of help from donors. You may be aware that the pro bono, again, I didn't answer your question completely. How does it work? The question, are we working? We are working. We do not have people coming to our office. I said we are unable to do that because of lack of capacity. But does that mean that we are not working? The judiciary has been very, very helpful. In fact, they have been doing what you're supposed to be doing, and the CJA has put me on notice that they can't be doing what another state agent is supposed to be doing. What happens is that when somebody appears in court and they're in these circumstances you have described, they're unable to represent themselves, and you can see they're going to suffer because of lack of an advocate. We have the pro bono scheme, which was set up under some guidelines, which was set up by the CJA Emeritus, Honorable Mutunga. And these people go to that pro bono committee, they are assigned an advocate, and they are paid some money. Now, the money, as of now, is managed by the judiciary. And I wish to confirm that this is not money allocated to the judiciary to do pro bono. This is money that they collect from donors, and somehow, before we put our act together, it's managed, and advocates are paid for the same
for
person
offering the
asked
pro bono
me.
services.
Yeah, people come, they are assigned an advocate to go to the registry. There's a committee, the pro bono committee, that is operating in all the court stations, headed by the registrar, deputy registrar, head of stations. Also, there are representatives of advocates in these committees. And when applications are made, or when requests are made for lawyers, the pro bono committee assigns lawyers, and there are lawyers who are always willing to be assigned. And then upon conclusion of the matter, actually at the start of the matter, upon getting instructions, you're given a small deposit. It's pro bono, so it's something very small.
But what does pro bono mean?
Oh yeah, another question. Pro bono, Latin meaning for free.
I see. So
the question would be, why pay?
Yes, I'm asking because it's for free for a small amount. I mean, it's...
So for free, I would assume, for free for the individual who is looking for the service, so that you do not charge the individual. However, there are certain things that need to be done by advocates that would then require something to be paid to them. But so the individual who's receiving the service does not pay from their pockets. It's taken care of by somebody else, but the lawyer is paid.
Yeah. I will tell you this. I mean, actually, when you talk about the money is paid, as of now, it's only 30,000 shillings. Well, it's
per case,
per accused person. There has been that debate. These rules that are put in 2015 have been amended over the years. There was that debate about how much is enough. It's 30,000, 15 at the start of the case. It's not necessarily to pay for the lawyer's fees. And it doesn't matter how long the case drags on for. It's going to remain 30,000 shillings. It's to cater for what we're saying. There are prison visits. One of the accused persons, some of them, because of their circumstances, they are held in remand. There are visits. There are photocopies to be done. Although again, the European Union is helping us a lot to help us access some of these documents without any fee. It's just to cater for that. But pro bono, yes, should be free. So this little amount is not necessarily legal fees. You don't start charging the way we charge under the advocate's remuneration order. It's just something for catering for the small
facilitating fee.
Okay.
Facilitating. But do we have a system in this country where some of the better established law firms offer services because they're in a position to, literally for free, meaning it's at their cost and nobody else's?
They do. There is actually, and I must confirm, even our organization, even as we put our act together, I have received a lot of calls from colleagues. People tell me, what is it that we can do to help? They are willing, and we're setting up a database where we have these lawyers. Some will say, I'm interested in children's matters, for example, and I'm willing to take up matters in my geographical area of operation, like say I'm in Eldoret or in Mombasa. We do. The famous Muruatetu case, for example, I mean, that was done, I gather, for free. Somebody is sitting. And we are encouraged, if you feel there's a matter that it touches you, it pricks your conscience, and you feel something is not happening, you take it up for free without even asking for the 30,000 shillings. We have so many times advocates appearing in court. They see somebody bundled in, and from the manner they're taking their plea to applying for cash bail to whatever, somebody stands up and say, Your Honor, allow me to be placed on record for the accused person. I'm willing to help. So true, I mean, people are willing to help.
So it does happen.
Colleagues. It does happen, and I thank my colleagues, lawyers, for doing that.
But now this is where now NLAS should be able to be coordinating all these things.
Absolutely, yes.
We are this morning discussing the National Legal Aid Service, established by the Legal Aid Act. Just in fulfillment of what the Constitution says, that you have a right, fundamental rights and freedoms, you have a right to access to justice, you've got a right to fair trial, you have a right to have access to an advocate, and if you don't have access to you can't afford an advocate, you have a right to be assigned an advocate by the court. This is why the National Legal Aid Service was established. Its chairman currently is William Musyoki Kimanthi, is the board chair, and we also have State Counsel Kisuya, who works in the secretariat of this, and he'll also come in and tell us now practically how they receive a case, how they go through a case, how they then make sure that we benefit from it. Your chairman has said that you've been working since establishment. I mean, you've been handling cases. You have several cases that you've even currently have. Take us through maybe one of them. How does it happen? So when someone goes before a judicial officer and the court then says you need legal aid, how does it get to you? How do you take it up? How do you take it to the conclusion?
Yeah, we necessarily don't get those clients from the court. Some are referred to us through prisons, others are referred through children's officer, others are just walk-in clients who have heard about NLAS. And in one of our mandates, ensuring that people are assessing justice, we have conducted what we call legal aid clinics in different countries, and most of the marginalized. We have been in Marsabit, we have been in Mandera, Isiolo, Tana River, besides these other towns. Now, we also have our own form where a client can fill and ask for legal aid. But because judicial officers have the information, and when they see a particular case and they see a substantial injustice will be meted, they usually write to us, or they tell that person, if he has been given bail or bond, go to these offices.
Okay.
So those who have been referred or those who just come in, we handle that case, we screen them to ensure they deserve legal aid. One of the challenges we face is that you'll get a good banker manager wants legal aid on matters of child support because he has been sued with one of the ladies he has sired with. You see, now when you look at his pay slip, this is somebody who wants a 6-figure, but they don't want to pay legal fees because there's that notion that lawyers are expensive.
Right.
And when a person hears about National Legal Aid Service, it's like, I better go there. They do it for me for free rather than pay. That is why when you look at our act, it says that somebody should be earning 30,000 and below to at least get legal aid to qualify.
So how do you screen them?
We screen them first by they get interviewed. When they come, most of those walk-ins, because those who are referred from prison and cell, automatically the information is known. But those who come like walk-ins, you just have a formal interview. And sometimes we use our skills to ascertain whether they qualify or not, because they are always informed that when you go there, kindly pretend, or the others even cry in our office just because somebody doesn't want to be told they don't qualify.
Cry as in tears dropping, or
Yeah,
cry as in wailing.
Or both. For added effect.
So others are also clients, because even by advising you legally, that is a form of legal aid. Others come and we give them advice which they appreciate and which helps them proceed with their matter.
Okay.
Yes, but others, if you come, we tell you the opposition. If you qualify, you'll get that aid. If you don't qualify, we tell you the reasons why, because there are more indigent, vulnerable and marginalized persons who deserve that aid rather than you. Yeah.
What's the scope of the representation? And I ask this because can somebody be guaranteed? You know, a lot of folks, I would imagine, then who come, apart from the folks who are trying to, cry and wail and maybe they cannot afford representation. What's the guarantee that somebody who comes to you, who's desperate, will then be represented fully as somebody who was paying top dollar for representation?
Can I answer that? Yeah. I mean, there's this notion that because you're getting something for free, then maybe it's a
lower package.
It's a low package. But no, actually, our mandate is to make sure that we give quality service. We make sure that you're accessible. We give our best, like we would if you're doing with a paying client, and that is our mandate. That is our mandate. So there's that guarantee. Our lawyers are, lawyers like any other, and they are committed to work like they would be if they're working in a private law firm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why did you take up this job?
You as William.
Me as William.
I want to understand what you're saying, because he's the chair.
Yeah, I'm the chair. Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
because you could have done many other things.
Yes.
Why did you take up this particular job?
I'm trained as a lawyer from,
Yeah, very nice.
It's all I know. One. Number
No,
two.
it's not all you know.
I could have been a butcher. I could have been a
go.
butcher, but for now, I
Yes.
mean, law practice and practice of law is what I've known all my life. But again, I get where you're coming from. I could have, sat in my office and enjoyed my private life. There's a lot of satisfaction, and it's one thing I'm realizing from also colleagues where you do. I'll call it free work, but if you give back to society, it's very fulfilling. It's very satisfying. Law, we are told many times that it's not a business; it's a profession, and what distinguishes it from other, money-making things is that there's an element of being immersed in what you trained and doing justice and giving back to the society. I am very lucky. I didn't sort of fight to be the chairman. Of course, there's an element of luck. I was appointed by His Excellency the President. Thank you very much for that appointment. And I consider this an opportunity for me to give back to the society.
Siti, why did you ask that question?
I asked that question because everything that I've heard so far is there is more demand than there is supply for the services that we're speaking of. And when you're talking about people who clearly, financially, socially are unable to fend for themselves, there is a selflessness that one needs to exhibit. One has to be a certain type of person who looks at life in a certain way to be able to do this sort of work. It's more like a calling. It's not something for the faint-hearted, because the reason why many people endure their clients is because the clients are paying. So it doesn't really matter how horrible the person is. When you think, the money is paying you, that horror recedes. You see?
From my experience at NLAS,
yes,
if you are not passionate about helping
people, yes,
you won't work there. And he can confirm to me, others come even on internship and pro bono, they leave. Because they see what they didn't expect.
Which is what?
Yes, it's like people come, serious cases. I've handled that. We do mediations.
Right.
And in fact, we have done 1,000 mediations successfully. More so on children matters, because these are matters of maintenance. You invite the father, the mother. Of course, the mother is the complainant. You come, you enter into a parental responsibility agreement. It works. But now you have a situation whereby the father comes. He tells you, I'm jobless. I lost my job from COVID. This woman is here with a kid who is sick. You end up giving money to take that kid to the hospital.
Because the child is sick today.
Yes.
And they have come for mediation.
Right.
She's seeking justice. The kid is also sick. What do you do? So you can go home very disappointed, very heartbroken. Others will go one way.
But Caleb, there's only so much that you can do as an individual in that case. Because yes, you are giving out of your own, benevolent heart. But how should such cases be handled? I mean, when somebody has come in there, like you're saying, they are two desperate parents and they are tussling over how do we support this child. At that point, the child is vulnerable, the child is sick. In the interest of the child who requires this medical service, this money should be coming from the NLAS account, shouldn't it? But that's where now the problem is, that you don't have money. Yeah.
But even more than that, from everything that I've heard about this service, it goes beyond what is even budgeted. Even if they had a budget, the demands will go beyond the budget. So unless someone is tuned, and unless someone has accepted that this is something, that's why I use the word calling, you will burn out. It's not something you'll be able to do for long.
I agree entirely, Banamuga. I agree entirely. It happens because some of the matters actually that come to our offices, I don't work there, he does, but you won't even deem them to be strictly legal issues. I'll give you an example. They told me a story of, remember you're talking about the indigent, the marginalized people, and somebody comes to the office and says the man she's been living with has been taken by another lady living in the same place in Mathare, and the help she needs from our office is for us to help her go and get her man back, and not just that, to also help her to change her ID from a father's name to the man's name. I mean, and this is somebody who's so agitated and they need advice.
They need counseling.
And I agree with you. I mean, when you get a matter like that, as a lawyer, where do you begin from? And it takes much more than just the law business like we know it. And I appreciate what our staff do. And there's likely to be burnout. Some of the issues that you deal with, if cases like this were to go to court, you can imagine now we are talking of backlog where cases are there, nothing happens. We deal with them at that level.
Sure.
Some of these people just need to hear somebody talk to them.
And that's where structures come in,
Absolutely.
William, because you see, what the National Aid Service is doing, and especially if you look at those cases, this is what the alternative justice system is also doing in various other ways. You know, if you have got just those AJS courts that have been established, the judicial officers and judges will tell you the kind of cases that they deal with. Even those that deal with murder cases, where you're basically looking at how horrible somebody has been treated. And judges always tell us, I mean, a case that comes before them and they're looking at the details and they're like, oh my goodness. But you constantly, you know, this is the job that you have to do. I want to come back into the structure of this because right now, as I get it, there's an issue with it being under the office of the Attorney General because only the budget of the Attorney General's office will help you do the job that you're supposed to be doing. And yet you should be having more. Right. There is the Judiciary Fund, which funds the judiciary. And we've seen, for example, the coordination between the judiciary and the various tribunals that have been established. Tribunals appointed by various ministers in various ministries, but they work under the judiciary. Can this work that way? Can the National Legal Aid Service work in conjunction with the judiciary to get part of the funding from the Judiciary Fund?
We could actually, and we are in the process of setting up our own fund. The Legal Aid Fund is part of the mechanisms that have been contemplated in the Legal Aid Act. We cannot give a service without money, and the way to deal with money is to set up the fund.
So what does the law say about the fund? When you set up the fund, how should money get into the fund?
Yes, money, the first person to contribute, of course, should be the national government. And we're hoping that once the fund is operational, they're going to put money in it. The second one, we expect money from donors. And as it were, like I said earlier, in fact, we already have donors helping us at the moment, even without the fund. There's a system where we are getting money and being able to work. Stakeholders, people of goodwill coming in and saying that I'm willing to. The meeting I had with the Honorable CJ, she assured us that she has a lot of friends who have also been asking what is it that we can do, and she's willing to help us also source. And again here, look, you understand the enormity. I agree with what Mr. Muga is saying. The challenge is big, money seems inadequate, and we'll be publicizing once the fund is set up to put in money so that we are able to meet the demand.
Beyond the legal services,
yes,
since you seek to have people volunteer, what about counseling services? Because clearly, by the time somebody is a clearly disadvantaged member of society, their problems usually that they carry with them are sometimes even greater than the legal problem that has brought them there. Or it is that problem that has brought about this legal issue that has brought them before you.
Yeah.
Do you have other plans to have supportive services like the one I've just mentioned? Sort of like buttress whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah. Do you know, part of the work we do, people also confuse our work to just appear in court. But even channeling problems in our own assessment where we feel people will get help is part of doing our work, and we actually do that. There are people who come to us, the case I've given, and in your own assessment you feel this is not strictly a legal issue. This is a matter for a counsellor, this is a matter for the chief, this is a matter for the pastor, and we do that. And in fact, even before sending them out, we have a counsellor. We have people trained in counselling services in our office. Again, not enough. I think at the moment you have only one person. Very good. And some people, like I said, they just need to have a listening ear, and they call back later to say, I've seen a post on Facebook, somebody saying they were at the verge of this, and having come to our office and speaking to an officer, they felt better, and the issue is gone.
Yeah.
So it's not strictly, I agree with you, legal issues. But part of our work is to channel those energies to where we feel they can be deflated in a good way. But I agree it's something that needs to be expanded because the needs are many.
For sure, at the moment there's a lot, there's needs, and there's also financial burden that's there. And sometimes we find that solutions come about as a forced position. So one would assume that representation of NLAS is around the country.
should be
around the country? Where do we have NLAS branches around the country?
We have NLAS in Nairobi.
Yeah.
We are at Kiptangicha, at KCS House at Mamangina Street.
Yeah.
We also have NLAS office in Mombasa. We are in Kisumu, Nakuru, Eldoret. We are on the verge of operationalizing 3 marginalized offices in Isiolo, Marsabit, Garissa, even in Mandera, and there already staff have been deployed there.
Wait, how many staff do you currently have?
Currently, we are about 25.
25 in all those stations?
Yes.
Out of the 25, 10 lawyers.
Yeah.
Did I get it right?
Yeah.
So 10 lawyers, and in all these areas, Nairobi, Kisumu, Mombasa, Isiolo, Eldoret, Marsabit,
Mandela.
with 10 lawyers.
Yes.
And 25 staff. The other 15, I'm assuming, are administrative staff.
Yeah.
Aye.
And if I may add, what the chairman told you that the AG office is decentralizing to areas, I think 37 counties where it was not present. And from the AG's office, they have deployed staff to these other counties for NLAS.
Okay.
So, I mean, in a nutshell, we are currently operational in 5 counties. He's mentioned them. We have offices. They've been operating since around 2016. The other 7, to make it 12, are in the process of being set up. And the only challenge you have is, again, the human resource, because you have everything. I mean, the donors have been very kind to us, the European Union. We even have vehicles, I'll tell you, brand new vehicles waiting to be deployed to help people in those areas. But again, until we get the staff.
Okay, so the staff is a thing. And because my question was going to then go towards communication of the availability of this service to people. I'm sure you're inundated with requests from folks to be able to represent them. But I still do think that there's a lot, if we talked about the majority of people who are unrepresented and cannot afford it, that if you were to communicate about the availability of these services, then you would be bursting at the seams in terms of who would come. So do you communicate about this service, or is it just something that we say, well, we're going to keep what we are doing for now without talking much more about it? Because then if you have 25 people around the country today and it's not communicated on such a wide level, what's to happen if more people knew about this service?
Yeah, well, yes, I agree. If we are to publicize our activities, obviously we've been inundated, and that is not to mean that we keep quiet. We have been doing quite a lot. In fact, this week, and one of the reasons we're here, we intend this to be our legal aid week, and we want it to come later on Friday with a legal aid day. We want people to know. It's one thing for people to know that we exist, it's another thing for us to be able to give the service. Our idea is to make sure that, for a start, part of sensitizing people about their rights is to know that their rights exist. Whether we be able to achieve, we'll deal with it when the time comes. Our hope is that you're going to be able to do it. One of the ways you're dealing with it is to work with partners. One of the things we've been doing, the difficult bit where you need an advocate is where there's actual court representation, because not anybody can go. But we're working with partners, working with paralegals. Paralegals are these people who are trained to, not necessarily lawyers, and they have an idea about the law and they advise. And look, some people get sorted out by merely getting the advice. It doesn't have to come from the qualified advocates.
How are paralegals trained?
There is a curriculum that we are also supposed to develop. We've already come up with one. It's supposed to be agreed upon with the Council for Legal Education. Somebody raised an issue whether it's the Council for Legal Education or the National Qualifications Authority. It's a small issue we're trying to deal with. But these are some of the issues they're dealing with. Our act is very young. I mean, there's no reason, but those are some of the things we're dealing with.
Young, there's an advantage there.
Yeah, exactly. We are trying to work with the Council for Legal Education to come up with a uniform curriculum so that you do not have people from all over the place saying they have an idea about the law. And not just training. We are also going to accredit. Remember,
so certification.
Yeah, certification. We are going to make sure that we accredit the people who are going to give the service, so that in areas where we cannot be because of our limited capacity, we have people, and we've done mapping. We identified who are the legal providers in areas like Turkana, like Marsabit, like Narok. Already that has been done. So that once we get an issue from that that area, then we are able to call our person to see whether there's an issue they can deal with. If they cannot deal with it, then they refer. We also mentioned that you're trying to get advocates, and I'll be visiting our new president also to try and encourage advocates to take up this thing. So that if you're based in Narok, for example, and you have a paralegal there with a client and they're stuck, then they can be referred to the advocate, and whatever issue they have.
I'm a little concerned though, because when you talk about a curriculum, I'm thinking of the issues that you've seen as being prevalent in the cases that you deal with. So it's a pointer as to what one could refer to as common problems.
Yeah.
And then there's what causes them, what brings them about. Now, having this in mind, and I'm thinking of the curriculum that you are setting up, I'm asking myself the question, do you bear these things in mind when setting up the curriculum? Because beyond just offering the legal service that a legal aid or a paralegal would offer, what about understanding some of the socio-economic situations that they are in and the problems that arise therein, so that this paralegal can actually, beyond the legal, can actually steer, just like you can, the people who come to them in the right direction, understand, because they've been trained to understand and to cope with whatever it is that that person will come with.
So the question is, what should be contained in that curriculum?
I'm asking exactly what sort of people do you have when helping you write that curriculum, and is that curriculum looking into what you found as some of the common issues that bring about the problems that you deal with this set of individuals in our communities?
Eric, you mentioned about AGS, for example, mediation. Already, I'm sure you read in the media every other day about people being invited to be trained on mediation.
Yes.
It's a very simple thing. And mediation, basically, is the whole idea of bringing people together. You know, alternative justice, we have conciliation, we have which is the other one? There are several AGS.
Arbitration.
Yes. Oh, yeah. And they do not take the rigors of legal training. So that if a matter can be dealt at that level, where it can be resolved through mediation, through conciliation, but then if it gets to issues which are beyond the capacity of a paralegal, that's when now you're saying, please push it to...
So you do mediation, but do you have people who specifically focus on mediation?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Yeah.
Yes, we do.
As we conclude, tell us about this week. So you're saying that you want this to be the legal aid week. All right. So what do you want people to know?
I want people to know about the existence of the National Legal Aid Service. We are opening now the Pandora's box. We do not want to duck away from our responsibility. We do not want to say because we do not have the capacity, then let's keep quiet until we get capacity. Let people know that there is a legal aid scheme established under the law. The small issues we're dealing with are our issues. They are internal. They are surmountable. We are able to work, even despite the small challenges we have, and with time we are going to resolve them. Perhaps you could ask why we picked on this week and not another date. I said at the start that the act was promulgated on 26th of April 2016, and we thought 26th of April would be a good day to make it a day
to mark your birthday.
Yeah, exactly.
With letting more people know that this baby is how many years old now? 8?
8, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Congratulations, and yes, it's an important conversation to have. Please come again, and let's create more and more awareness about this, and also to know so people can know the kind of cases to bring to you, how to know that they qualify to come to you, and also, success stories are a good thing to tell. Caleb Kisuya is a state counsel, and William Musyoki is the board chair of the National Legal Aid Service. They've been our guests. This is the Legal Aid Week. Get to know more about them.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.